John McMullen covers the Eagles for our website, 973ESPN.com. He also covers the league nationally, writes a national NFL column for FanRag Sports NFL. We'll dive into our NFL news and notes as we do each and every day at this time. John McMullen here on 97.3 ESPN. Johnny, how are you?
Doing well. Good afternoon, Mike.
Greetings, my friend, as we have live football on the field for day number 2 of OTAs. And yesterday we heard Doug Peterson speak, and today really got an opportunity to, everybody's out there for day number 2 now, but some storylines really. We talked to Trey Burton earlier today. I really thought he brought an interesting perspective about how they had him, an undrafted guy, go and talk to many of the younger players on this team. And I really felt that was a nice message to send. And I really feel that these OTAs are a great opportunity for these young players to get themselves in the conscious of the coaches so that when August comes around, they say, you know what, that guy impressed me in May. And there's a lot of young guys out there right now today that are in that position because this team has a lot of wide open battles that we know.
Yeah, it's very important, the off season for younger players. There's no question when we talk about Fletcher Cox or Jason Peters missing days. Look, it's not going to affect them. We can pretend it's a big deal, but
right.
Once August rolls around, they'll be fine. But as far as undrafted guys go, they need to make an impression. And it's harder today than it's ever been because of the current CBA, where you've limited practice time in the off season. There's not as much padded practice, padded work in training camp. So all of that enters into it, and you have to, as an undrafted guy, really seize your moment. And Trey's a perfect guy to talk about that.
Yeah.
As an undrafted player out of Florida. Chris Maragos is another one of those types who's lasted a very long time by being a great special teams player. But it's tough for those guys.
Yeah, and I'm interested to get your take on that tight end position since we did talk to Burton. And, because he said, look, I'm looking around the field and I can already see the difference in talent. Like, it's evident. Like, we've got Alshon and Torrey Smith's got a ton of speed. And, how do you think the tight ends now fit in? Because we know that Andy, who runs a very similar offense, always liked to utilize that was a big spot specifically in Kansas City with Kelsey down there. They like to utilize the tight end, and I'm assuming that Doug would like to follow suit in Philly if he can.
Yeah, I think to a large degree he already has. I mean, if you look at the numbers Zach Ertz picked up last year, that's pretty impressive. I hear this constant narrative almost every year. When is Zach Ertz going to break out? When is Zach Ertz going to break out? Well, he did. He did last year. There aren't a lot of tight ends in this league that put up better numbers than that.
It just seems that his year is so half and half, right? I mean, is that fair?
Well, I think it's fair to say you would like to see more consistency from week to week. But that's where you can pick apart Kelsey's year. You can do it with anybody. When Jimmy Graham is healthy, and they'll have these ebbs and flows, and it all depends on the game plan. Maybe you're playing against a defense that has a great safety, and they're not going to show up as much that week. So I think you always strive for consistency. But as far as pass-catching tight end, I think Zach Ertz is already here. He's arrived. Very good. The Eagles know that, and they're certainly going to utilize it. It all comes down to what they do behind Zach Ertz. Is it going to be Brent Stellick getting the majority of reps as normal as the one blocking tight end on this team? Or will the versatility of Trey Burton kind of win out, and will he get more playing time?
I agree with you there, and I guess the versatility of Burton is an interesting story because, he played quarterback and running back and tight end and wide receiver. He seems like a guy who there's so much more there for. Like, you have this tremendous athlete who has displayed the ability to play at this level, and it seems like, okay, how do we harness this all and get the maximize him?
Yeah, I think it's very difficult for NFL coaches. They always talk about, and I call them manufactured touches guys, and they want to create these mismatches, and they do it in practice. And I saw it a lot with Trey last year when they would split him out wide outside the numbers and try to get a linebacker on him. And it's all great on paper. And then when the real bullets are flying on Sunday and you got 40 seconds to formulate a play call and you got to get the right guys in for the formation, and it goes really, really quickly. And I'm not picking on the Eagles here. You could look at any team in this league in those manufactured touches guys. Tavon Austin, a guy you're familiar with. Cordero Patterson, who's got so much talent. But when guys like that, you need to have a package to get them to football. It just seems to never work out.
That's an interesting point, John McMullen. You make there at JF McMullen on Twitters. Earlier you wrote at 973ESPN.com, I think this is pretty funny, that the punter not being there yesterday got more notice than your former first-round pick. Maybe Marcus Smith should be out picking sconces because that might be where he's going to be ending up if nobody even noticed he wasn't there yesterday.
Oh, how about that for an insult when we ask the head coach who's not there and he doesn't even know you're not there?
That's awful.
And then, the Philadelphia Eagles, by the way, have the largest media contingency in the entire NFL. And we might have been 50 strong yesterday. And none of us noticed till at least 90 minutes inside of the practice. And that's not a good sign for Marcus.
No, it's not. And last year there was some thoughts. All right, moving to the 4-3, Jim Schwartz, maybe they can help him out. That's over, right? I mean, this guy can't play.
Well, I think it did help him out a little bit. I think he was better. But the Eagles have gotten better at the position. So I think the writing is on the wall for him here. But I will say, I think Marcus Smith is an NFL player. I think he'll be in the league.
Mm-hmm.
It didn't work out here. I think a lot of it is tied to expectations because the Eagles reached for him, and they shouldn't have chosen him in the first round. He probably should have been a second-round pick. And then the narrative would have changed a bit. And maybe, who knows?
That's fair.
He would be here as a role player, a situational player. But I do think he's an NFL player.
No, and look, I thought at times last year he did a decent job, against the run, pinning the tackle in, turning the running back up the field. It just, the Eagles weren't going to play him over Barwin, and they're not going to play him over Long, nor Barnett, nor Curry this year. So he seems like a man. He's Nelson Agholor of the defensive end. Agholor might be extremely improved. I don't know that you'll ever get a chance to see it.
Yeah, I agree with that. I thought Nelson, and I wrote about it on 973ESPN.com, he was one of the most impressive players on the field day one. Now, what does that mean? You don't have pads on. I mentioned on the show yesterday there's no pressure on him. And he performed very well. He's very sharp with his routes. He caught the football. He showed his athleticism. But I think the ship has already sailed. He's going to be here for this season as a deep part of the roster because of his contract. And then the Eagles will move on because they have better options. Same thing with Marcus Smith. You mentioned the names. There's no way he's going to play over Chris Long or Derek Barnett. And then you even have a Stephen Means type who's cheaper.
Yeah.
What do they do? Might as well save a little money.
What do they do? Like Curry, Long, Barnett, those guys are all vying for the right side, right? I mean, is there anybody in competition, or what do they do if Brandon Graham needs to play off or Brandon Graham gets hurt for some reason? Which one of those guys is kind of the backup to that side? Does Smith or Means have a shot? Is that where they get their playing time, or does Curry move over? Does Barnett? You know what I'm saying? Like who gets kind of moved over?
Well, yesterday was interesting because they started out. Brandon was the left end, Vinny was the right end with the first team, but they also flipped the time. So I would say 80% of the time Brandon was at left end, but 20% of the time he was at right end, and then Vinny would flip. On the second team, Chris Long was playing left end, Derek Barnett was playing right end, and then the third team was Alex McAllister playing left end, Stephen Means playing right end.
There's another name into the equation.
Day one. Yeah. And, clearly they want versatility. Because in the nickel package, a lot of times it was Brandon on the right side, Chris Long at left end, and you had Vinny Curry rushing from the inside. So you want a lot of versatility.
Talk with John McMullen, 97.3 ESPN.com. Eagles OTAs continue today. Mike Gill is the new wide receiver coach, and I was reading your stuff and some other stuff, suggesting that he was getting into Nelson Agholor and Dorial Green Beckham. So there's a clear change from a coaching standpoint with these wide receivers.
Yeah, there is, but I don't want to rip Greg Lewis too much because I don't think he was at fault for the play of Nelson Agholor or Dorial Green Beckham. But there's a natural sort of new blood, and Mike Gill is a very vocal guy. He's got some interesting drills where he brings out these ski poles with flags on top. And anytime you see that kind of stuff, people get excited. But I got news. Alshon Jeffrey's going to be a good receiver because he's a good receiver. And he would have been a good receiver if Greg Lewis was here. And Dorial Green Beckham is struggling. And Mike Gill is here, and he struggled last year with Greg Lewis. So there can be some improvement due to coaching. I don't want to belittle it. But
sure.
The bottom line is, if you can play, you can play.
Right. And I wasn't trying to throw Lewis under the bus either. I'm just saying that there's a different feel around, a different attitude around that position with the coach. Maybe, some guys need to be coached in different ways. Agholor, maybe he needs a guy to chew him out. Maybe somebody else likes a more laid-back guy, right? Yeah,
that's part of it. You have to tap into somebody's personality, and you're right. Some guys do that better than others. In the case of Nelson, look, he almost had a nervous breakdown after the Seattle game last year. So there's a guy who was affected mentally.
Has that been brought up at all? Has anybody talked to him these days and asked him, how his off season is, how's his mental state?
Well, yesterday was the first day we had the open locker room with the veterans there, and I think he ultimately spoke to someone, but that was very, very late in the period when I was gone. So he had an open locker room for at least an hour, and he had not been in. And look, we'll all talk to him at some point.
Right.
And it'll be a big story in the off season and the preseason. But he's just not going to be impactful on this team. He's not a part of the receiving rotation any longer.
Hey, I don't know how it made the front page of a pretty prominent newspaper, but report or opinion or whatever that the Eagles not happy with Carson Wentz seeing,
Oh, wow.
I listened to the press conference. I wasn't in the room. You were. I listened to it. I watched video of it. I didn't get that sense. I mean, is that coming from somebody in the building, or is he taking that from Peterson's press conference yesterday?
That was Marcus Hayes. And, hey, Marcus Hayes is a columnist, and that's the way he took it, and that's his opinion. And there's nothing wrong with that. But I didn't pick it up. You didn't pick it up. Everybody else I've talked to didn't pick it up. When we talked to Doug in prior settings, he was not upset with him looking for mechanics coaching at all. And I think part of it is, and when you're a general columnist, and I've been a general columnist, you are obviously doing every sport. And just by the nature of the time constraints, you always don't understand the NFL system as it's going on. And I think a lot of guys don't realize how much practice time has been curtailed since 2011. So the great players, and this goes at the quarterback position, Tom Brady works with the same people Carson Wentz works.
Right.
You have to go out and do things on your own to get better.
Right. That's the CBA.
Because you can't work at the facility. Yeah.
John McMullen's with us here. That story made me laugh a little bit. The coaches are not thrilled with Wentz going outside to get his mechanics, which I thought Peterson kind of talked about it earlier in the offseason that, he's going out and he's getting some working on a couple things. Let me ask you about Carson. You said it yesterday. From year 1 to year 2, Trey Burton was like, he acknowledged about – and I brought up an interesting – well, I thought it was interesting. Maybe people listening didn't think so. But I thought it was interesting. I asked Burton about, look, let's say hypothetically in the locker room there was a side that wasn't happy with Bradford getting traded. Like they weren't thrilled. Were those people at least impressed by the way Wentz got thrown in and handled himself, even if they were more supportive of Bradford being the quarterback? And he followed the question and said, you know what, yes. And from where he was last year at that point to where he is now, he's like, I don't even recognize the guy. Like, he has come that far along.
Yeah, I mean, nobody was closer to Sam than Jordan Matthews. And those two were as close as you can be. We're very excited about playing together again. And all of a sudden you have the late trade. And I know Matthews was disappointed a little bit, but that was erased really, really quickly. And people recognize how much talent Carson Wentz has. And it was natural for him to sort of, stay in the shadows when Sam was here. He was not the starting quarterback. And ever since he became the starting quarterback, he's taken over this team.
Yeah.
But this is his first off season as the guy. So there is a big difference.
Last year, I recall we're about this time of the year, and you had said that Leotis McKelvin was their best corner, and it wasn't close. And he obviously had injury.
And he was,
sadly. And he obviously had injury issues. That was an issue. How do you compare Patrick Robinson to even Leotis McKelvin? Like, are they better off if they – does McKelvin even have a job in this league at this point?
He does not at this point, which tells you – I think a lot of it is as you mentioned, though, health-driven. As far as Patrick Robinson, we've seen him for one day. So, but you can tell he's a professional. You can tell he understands what he's doing. And a lot of his issues have been injury-related, just like Leotis.
Right.
Leotis. And by the way, like McKelvin, he was a first-round pick.
Right. No, that's why I'm asking. Like,
So
are they comparable in terms of talent? Like I said, McKelvin's problem in this league is he's been hurt. Robinson so far, yeah, he's been hurt, but he's also not been very good. McKelvin, when he's on the field, is actually decent.
Yeah, and Patrick had one good year.
San Diego.
You're right.
Well, he had a good year in San Diego. They got him paid in Indianapolis.
Yeah, and that's not great when you've been playing as long as he has. Like, you need better odds than that. So if you're asking me, would I be comfortable with Patrick Robinson as the best cornerback on this team? Obviously not. And that's why that's the biggest concern on this team is cornerbacks.
Russell Douglas, I know you can't see much and you're only out there for 2 days, but Does he have the look and the feel and the sound of a guy who's going to be a factor?
Yeah, he's certainly got the look. He's the Mac Hollins of the defense. I mean, he fits the suit. In fact, he looks like Eric Rowe, which would have been nice to have Eric Rowe here, who would have been a veteran corner at this time. But he's so long, and he's physically equipped to play the position.
Right.
He's got great ball skills. We know that. The only issue with him is, does he have the recovery speed to be a consistent NFL corner? And we're not going to see that for a while. And I guess the other problem that every young corner has to go through is there is a huge adjustment from college to the NFL, because you're allowed to be a lot more physical as a cornerback at the college level. And I've seen guys totally lose it mentally when they see flag after flag after flag. So that's something you got to get used to, and you got to get used to it very quickly.
Yeah, that's a good point. I think Dominic Foxworth was on with Josh on a Saturday afternoon one week, and he brought up a really interesting point when talking about the draft. And he said a big difference is at corner. You don't realize it, but the quarterback in college can't make the throws that the quarterback in the pro can make. So in college, the corners can get beat, but because the throw is mediocre, they can put themselves back in position. They can't get beat and get back in position in the NFL with these quarterbacks, that the quarterbacks are so much better week in and week out than they are at the college level.
Yeah, and it stands to be true. I mean, what you've seen time and time again, the best example would be the back shoulder fade from Aaron Rodgers. When you see cornerbacks with perfect technique, perfect position, and there's nothing they can do about it.
Yeah.
Because the ball is placed where only one guy can get it. And Foxworth is right. You don't see that at the college level.
J.F. McMullen on Twitter, FanRag NFL, his NFL national columns, and all his Eagles stuff at 973ESPN.com. John, have a good night.
Hey, thank you, Mike.